All right. All right. So today we're talking about emotional trauma, how to deal with it, and how to how to heal it. And for the people who don't know too much about trauma, this just means difficult emotions in general, any kind of difficult emotion. How do you deal with it? How do you heal it? And how do you go through that journey of being someone who has these strong emotions and becoming a person who is better able to be with those emotions, and then eventually becoming a person who doesn't necessarily have those emotions much at all anymore, is how I'm kind of thinking about it.
Deep subject to go into today, Thorbjørn. I
Yeah,
can already
yeah,
feel the weight when we're talking about it now. It's like, whoa. Um,
yeah. How do you mean, like energetically, or like responsibility wise, or what do you mean?
Probably more energetically, like, when talking about like trauma or childhood trauma, it's like, whoa, like this is a maybe a big thing, or like to lean into that. It's also maybe
Yeah,
something that we don't often do in conversations, or perhaps when we talk about this stuff with people close to us, family or friends, maybe they feel like it's too much, or they're putting their problems onto us, or it's too uncomfortable maybe. And so I'm
yeah,
just really kind of grateful to give this space right now with you to go into this, and to also hopefully give people some insight into how to navigate this kind of process and what to do. And it's something that I kind of work with people who come and see me as a therapist. I can definitely do this quite often. So it's a I think it's a gift, and it's something quite special to open up, and to kind of guide people in letting go of this past emotions or trauma that may be still very present in our lives. And we notice that from different ways of how we react to um, different situations. And so these emotions can be really quite deep in us. And so, um, yeah, it's a special thing to be able to release that and to let go of some of this stuff that is weighing us down. Yeah.
yeah. There's a Danish poet who said that whatever you are not given in childhood, you'll spend the rest of your life chasing.
So what are you chasing, Tobin?
And well, I'm probably chasing love, I guess, which is, I think most people do that anyway. But but it is interesting how it's so important to deal with trauma, because if we don't, then we'll be chasing that thing. Um, and we'll probably be doing it in such a way that we're never going to get it that way. That's the worst part. Is we have mechanisms, and those mechanisms usually are dysfunctional. So someone who, for example, a very common pattern is someone who wants love may instead try to get pity. And so they have different strategies to get other people to feel pity for them. But the problem is that pity isn't love. And but it's better than nothing. So a lot of people will spend their whole lives molding a personality character just to get pity from other people. And what they really want is love. They don't want to pretend to be small and have someone pity them. They want actually to be seen for who they are.
So you're trying to say that you want to be seen, Tobin?
I'm not 100% sure what it is that what I want to do. For me, I guess I had the good sense to find a lot of people, like for example, you and me, we talk, and I can be vulnerable. I can tell you how I think and feel. So I've been seen a lot of times by a lot of people to a high extent. So I'm not entirely sure what it is that I'm looking for. Um, Sometimes it's to be seen by a certain person. Sometimes it's our parents that we want to be seen by. Sometimes the whole world can see you, but if one person doesn't see you, that's what it is that you actually want, what you actually need. But then, and for some people that's possible, but because some people, their parents will never be able to see them, and because for some people their parents are simply dead before they can do that. That's why we get into this topic of how do you deal with trauma, how do you heal trauma, because there won't necessarily be someone there to resolve it for you or with you. The person who caused the trauma might not even be in your life anymore. There might be no way to contact them.
And just to say out loud, it's not so necessary for that person to be here with you now to be able to work through that trauma. You can do that
Mm.
without them actually in front of you if they've passed away or if it's too much for you
Yeah.
to be in their presence.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think these kind of things is an individual journey, because for me sometimes the person has been has been needed to trigger it, because some of my trauma I had recently had or just yesterday I had a very strong traumatic experience where a lot of stuff came up, and I didn't even know that I had that. I wasn't aware that I had these emotions. And that was triggered by that person. So sometimes it can be helpful to use the other person to trigger those emotions. Or, and then of course, if you can't talk to them, if you can't do something, then that's the easiest path. But for a lot of people, that's not. If it's a parent, for example, which it is in my case, um, a parent will have to become very conscious and learn a lot of wisdom to be able to sit down and have a conversation about what trauma they caused you, and maybe where their trauma came from. And that whole thing is a very vulnerable, very difficult conversation, because there's a lot of blame and guilt in that from both sides. And so it's not always realistic. It may actually rarely be realistic to sit down and have that conversation. Um, so on the conscious path, it's so important that we don't find our life energy and our happiness and our consciousness being completely absorbed in all destructive emotions like that. So we still want to deal with it, even if the other person can't come to the table. Or maybe in some situations, we don't even want the other person to come to the table, because trauma can look, there are many different kinds of trauma. There's also different kinds of abuse where you may not want to have anything, you may not want to be in room with the person. And so we come back to the fact that how do we deal with these emotions without necessarily um, having the other person there to go through it with us, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a key thing.
And perhaps taking responsibility for some of this, because you could say blame is the opposite of taking responsibility, putting it on the other person. It's their fault. It's it's them who have caused this pain to me. And so taking responsibility for perhaps they have treated you in a certain way or done something horrible to you, or kind of, and bring it back to like, okay, yourself, and how can I take responsibility for the way I am today? Because that's where we are right now. We're like, as much as we sometimes live in the past or the future, we are in our feelings or emotions right now, aren't we?
Yeah, the Buddha said that if someone shoots you with an arrow, you shouldn't run around with an arrow in your stomach trying to find out who did it. You should get the arrow removed, right? And so what we want to do with our trauma is we want to heal it. We don't want to spend time fighting or resenting or blaming, because if the other person can't or won't understand it anyway, then there's no point in going to them to find some kind of resolution, because they might not be conscious enough to do that. And the thing is that it's not what I'm starting to understand is that we are thrown into this life as children, and we have parents and we have peers and we have institutions. And for the first 20 or 30 years, shit just kind of happens. And no one knows what they're doing. No one knows what's going on. Everyone's affected by emotions, thoughts. Everyone's asleep. And, sometimes terrible things happen, emotionally or physically or both. And and then you wake up, and then it's time for you to clear yourself of everything that happened, because society isn't conscious. People aren't conscious. They don't know what they're doing. And if we were to spend our whole lives resenting people for what they did when they didn't understand, then you ruin your own life before it's even started, because of people that did things that they don't understand. Jesus says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And that's not an intellectual idea. It's not that that's something we should talk about as well. You don't necessarily forgive by convincing yourself that you want to forgive or have to forgive. Sometimes you can make a choice to forgive, but that's usually when you've reached to a point emotionally where you can let go. So there is like an option that pops up. It's like, do you want to forgive? Yes, no. And you can say yes, and then something happens. But there is also a lot of people who try to forgive because they know it's the right thing to do or whatever. But until the emotions are ready to leave your body, it's not forgiveness.
Often
Because
it's resisted when you go to like forgive somebody who's caused you pain, right? It's like, well,
right,
hang on a second. Why am I going to forgive them? They're the one that's done this to me, or they've
right,
like put this trauma onto me or whatever it is. So it's like, often it's, when you talk about forgiveness, it's like, no way, I'm not going to go there because they've hurt me. They've caused this pain.
yeah,
And so choosing to lean into that is also, like making the willingness to kind of go on the other side. And maybe that doesn't happen straight away. Maybe that takes some kind of preparation and doing. But just know that, like, when you hold on to that trauma or that pain and are not willing to forgive, then like it's like holding on to like a hot coal. You and the other person are both like holding on to a hot coal that you're about to throw at somebody. Well, what does that do to your own
yeah,
hands? It burns you, right? And so as long as you're holding
yeah,
on to that trauma, you're burning also yourself. And that's where the risk of it being permanent is that when you just like always hold on to that and not willing to let go, even though that it's quite painful or very painful, even though that it's brought a lot of sadness or a lot of emotion into your life, and you feel like resentment, and you feel that this person is bad and they don't deserve forgiveness. These are all
Yeah.
things to kind of start to work with, is and know that forgiveness is the pathway for letting go. Whether you choose to do that intellectually first, and then that helps emotionally let go, or the other way around. It's the process towards that point.
Yeah, and I see sometimes, and it was that for me for some years as well, is that my resentment became a part of my personality. And that's natural if we have certain thoughts and emotions that come up a lot, that it becomes integrated with our identity.
The victim, right?
So we can make,
The
huh?
victim, like that's a classic identity kind of.
Well, it may not even be the victim. You could also be the one that recovered, or the one that's gonna show them, or it can take a lot of. It's not necessarily only victim. It can take a lot of shapes, but the common denominator is that it's defined by something painful that happened, and you never really want to be defined by something painful, because then you're coming from pain, right? Um, so I think the first step, because that's kind of what you brought up, the first step in dealing with trauma, if you're on the first step of the trauma journey, then, and that's something that I went through yesterday. I'm 36. I thought I had sorted things out, and then suddenly something came up, and I was very angry, and it was a difficult emotion, very difficult. And the only reason I could really go through that and heal the part of that I could yesterday was that I understood that in that moment I needed to be angry, I needed to hate, and I needed to allow myself the fact that I didn't think about forgiveness at all. So the first thing I would say, if you're on there are many steps to releasing trauma and to forgiveness, but I would say the first step is be okay with the fact that you don't want to forgive the person. I think that's the first step. Be okay that you're angry. Be okay that you're furious and all this, because to be very, very technical, there are emotions that are physically locked in your body, and this is a fact. If you don't know this, then you will experience it directly eventually. So there are literally emotions that are stuck in you, and the way that those are released is that they come up in your consciousness. That means you feel them, and then by feeling them, you start to release them. And sometimes to release them, you will have to have thoughts that match the emotion. So, for example, I was angry, so I had very angry, very hateful thoughts. But those thoughts weren't necessarily self-indulgent, pain-creating thoughts. Those thoughts were a mechanism that would just take in something deep inside me, and it was bringing it up. So I was just bringing up the emotion, and by bringing up my anger, I was able to see, oh, there is my anger. I was able to be in it, live in it, and that started to release it. That brought me closer to letting go of that trauma. Now, if I had told myself, oh, no, I need to forgive, I would have been resisting the trauma release process by not allowing my emotions to be, to arise and to be acknowledged and to be felt, and for my mind to say these things that it needed to say. And that's, we talked about writing a letter to someone that you have grief with, whatever. You can write you can write a letter, and you can throw away that letter, because sometimes our emotions are so destructive that they're not good for anyone. So you don't necessarily always need to tell the person or send them a letter or whatever, but sometimes talking about it to people, writing it down, recording it, whatever it is, that can help you go through the process of starting to release the emotion, getting that catharsis. And then you find, as the emotion becomes more and more released, you also find that you come to a different place emotionally and intellectually, where you're like, okay, I can be more constructive now. I can think more rationally now, because I needed to be all anger or all fear or all pity or all patheticness or all despair. I needed to embody the emotion fully and let it embody me and take me over, because that was part of it being cleaned out. And so sometimes, and in doing that, we have to allow ourselves to truly hate, truly despair, to whatever it is. We need to allow ourselves to be total in it. And so we can't be judging our thoughts and be going like, is this wise? Is this spiritual? Is this blah, blah, whatever? Because then we interrupt the process that says that to be free, you have to feel it to heal it, basically. You have to truly, truly embody this emotion, and then you can sort of release it, sort of shake it out in whatever way. So I would say the first important thing is that for all conscious people, all beings, their goal is to become free. And it's totally okay if the first step in that is that we realize that, I don't want to be free. I just want to hate this person. I want to punish them. I want them to feel everything they did to me. That's all okay, because that can be an important step in the process. So don't try to be too wise or too smart, because what releases an emotion is the ability to feel it. It's not the intention to forgive or to be spiritual or to be good or whatever. You have to actually surrender to what you feel, because the emotion came in by someone making you feel it, and it'll go out by you allowing yourself to feel it. So I would say the first step of forgiveness can very well be allowing yourself to not want to forgive at all.
And you did that yesterday, fully allowed yourself to express that emotion, or emotions, to be in it fully and to acknowledge it, to go into the pain.
Yeah, I did. And it was difficult because the spiritual ideas that I have brought up of forgiveness and all these things, of the fact that I don't want to hate anyone, because that's just hurting myself. I had to let go of that as well in the moment, because I had to become nothing but hate. And as I did that, the hate started to abate. It took a few hours of just thinking hateful things and feeling hateful things, and just very strong experience. But then it slowly started to abate and things started to calm down. And I realized that, oh yeah, I'm starting to come back to myself, and that now the anger is, now a portion of the anger has healed. How much, I don't know yet, because this is new for me. So we'll see when it comes back. We'll see what we can do about it.
When
but
you say this is
now
new,
the
like
journey
this,
to
this specific emotion is new to you, or this process?
Yeah, I've had other kinds of trauma, but I've never had anger to this extent. I didn't know that was in me. I didn't know that I had suppressed anger to this extent. And a lot of people will find out that they have this. And anger is one of the most difficult emotions, because you're angry, you want to hurt other people, and that can be hard to allow yourself to feel and think those things. But you're just feeling it, you're just thinking it, you're not actually doing it. But if you want the anger to come out, you're going to have to allow it to come up. So you're going to have to let go of all these good boy, bad boy ideas, and you can't judge yourself in the process. You have to just allow the emotion to do what it needs to do.
And that's a pretty brave thing to do, right? To fully be in it, to allow yourself.
Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah. Yeah, I've done it many times in my life, but never with anger, never with that emotion. I've done it with fear, I've done it with sadness, I've done it with despair and all kinds of emotions, but never with anger. So probably my consciousness was not strong enough until this moment to release this emotion, to release this trauma. And anger, for me, this is different for different people, but anger for me is the most difficult emotion, because because to be with anger without just disappearing away into it is something that's definitely the most difficult thing for me. And for everyone, it's very different. I know for a lot of people, shame is the most difficult. I don't think I have any problems with shame really, but shame can be very difficult for people as well. And some people can't be sad, so it's all it all depends on what is hard for you. And the more difficult it is, the more release you'll get, and the more you'll find that whatever you felt was missing in your life, you'll find that that's what starts coming when you go through this thing that was creating a deep inner blockage in you.
And just know that, like, for a lot of people going into this pain and fully allowing yourself to expect to bring it up and to be in it is quite uncomfortable for most people, right? And so our normal reaction would be to try and escape or avoid it and be like, it's too much. I can't handle this. I don't want this in my life, and just push it away. And yet it will keep coming back because we do that, right? And so what you're doing right now is the opposite to that. What you're doing right now is fully allowing it to be there. This emotion to just come fully up in your body and be in it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Thorbjørn, so that's step number 1, you said, or phase number 1,
right,
or whatever you mentioned. What is the next part, or then is there for you?
Well, the next part is, and a lot of people will enter the journey at this part, is that once you start to get a handle of the emotion, once you've been through the trauma wheel a few times, because these things tend to come up, and then the pain is active for a while, and then it subsides. And during its active phase, that's where you have all these thoughts, all these emotions. That's where your world might turn into like this dark nightmare kind of thing. You might think the world is a terrible place, but what's actually happening is it's just your old emotions coming up. And it's painting you this picture of the world, the way it feels when you feel those things. So if it's fear, then the world feels dangerous, but the world is not dangerous, it's just fear. And so once you go through that cycle a few times, it comes up, you stay in it as well as you can, you allow it as much as you can, you release as much of it as you can, just by feeling it. Feel it to heal it. There's nothing more. Then you start to come to a point where you're like, well, this is something that happens to me. It's not something I want to hold on to. I definitely want to release this. I want to let go of it. I want to forgive this. And then you become more detached from the identity, whatever caused this, whoever caused this, and you become more, you find more wisdom, and you know that, oh, well, this is a thing I have to go through, and it's just something that happens in me. I'm not so identified with it anymore. I don't believe in it so much anymore. It's just thoughts and feelings, and I like to release it. And so you become more wise, and you understand that this is something that's happening to you, and it's something you want to let go of, and you start looking at other people as less in a guilt of blame and guilt, because you understand that, well, this is something that you don't really want in you. It's not really about the other person anymore. It's about your well-being, right? And then at some point you may come to the step that we talked about, where it's like, well, you can forgive, and then you can forgive, and then you can really let go. Or you might find that the emotion just slowly disappears because you're cleaning it out little by little, and then it may not even be necessary to forgive because now the grudge is gone. But in the second step, you now know that you do want to let go of this, because you've allowed yourself. You've allowed yourself to feel, no, I want to be angry forever, for example. So now you come to the point where you're like, well, that's what my anger is saying. but I actually want to be free, but will allow the anger to do and say what it wants because it needs to come out. And of course, this is not the same with all emotions, because fear, for example, fear does not have the same blame in it that anger does. So not all emotions are directed at a person. Some emotions can just be something that you feel and you just can go through. There may not always be an intellectual grudge behind it. Sometimes it's just strong emotion. And those are generally easier to deal with, because then it's just a question of, in your life, you have this fear coming up now and then, and that's disrupting you. And so you will then feel the fear and go through it. It's like if you have a phobia for bees or something. That's a traumatic response. And you can release that phobia by
bees themselves.
Learning to be with...
By being amongst bees.
Yeah, amongst bees, that's a really good book title. But yeah, you can, in whatever controlled environment you need to do it to trigger your fear, you can do it in that way. But of course, with something like exposure therapy, you have to be very, very careful and not overwhelm yourself, because that doesn't help at all.
And that's where you do it in a safe space. For example, in a, like, if you can't hold the space for yourself, which it sounds like, you're able to do that. Not everyone's able to do that, Thorbjørn. Yeah. Or not everyone's able to be willing to go that deep into the trauma themselves.
Right.
And that's where, when you can turn to a therapist or a psychologist or someone to hold that space.
Yeah.
So you can move through that trauma and release that. Because not everyone is as brave as you are, Thorbjørn. And some people are. And some people are willing to go into it themselves. But often it's so fucking painful that we don't want to turn to that and be in that ourselves. So that's when somebody else guiding us or holding space can be in a really powerful way of being in that.
Yeah, and some people are brave, but they still can't do it on their own. And, I've always had people, like I talk to you, and I've always had people to talk to about these things. And I haven't had a therapist because I found spirituality before I found a good therapist. But if I had found a good therapist, if the people around me at the time had understood that I very much needed therapy, then the things would have been a lot easier, right? So, but I've used my friends as therapists instead, and I was lucky to have good friends, so that worked out. So talking to other people about these things, definitely a big one. I have never really gone through anything all by myself. I've never done that, because talking about it, when you talk about something, that's a way to learn to give it space, and it's much easier because there's another person there. Of course, you have to choose people who can be that for you. Don't choose people who reject you when you do it. That's terrible.
Deny the emotion or feeling. Also want it to go away, for example.
No. And then there are people who can just do all this on their own. And if you can do that, then just do that. Mm. People are very different. But I see a lot of the reason I wanted to make this episode is that I see a lot of the people I work with, or just people that I'm helping, and a lot of my friends, and I just see a lot. I see that people have strong emotions in certain situations, and they don't know what to do with them. And this trauma release thing is something everyone should know, because if you're experiencing strong emotions in a situation, when you're with your children or with your friends or in school or wherever you find a very strong emotional response, that's due to trauma. Because life doesn't make you feel strong emotions for no reasons. Unless there's a reason to feel a strong emotion, it's not natural to feel to feel painful emotions, to feel very awkward, to feel very ashamed, feel very afraid. Um, Whenever you find a strong, difficult emotion, it's because you have trauma, whether you know it or
Mm.
not. And when you do that, what you should do is you should want to um, go into it and release it, and then so that you can live your life without having to feel these difficult emotions in something that should be a normal situation.
Can I just add with that? The trauma is there, right, because of the unwillingness to feel that emotion in that moment. So when we were
Right.
children, or well, maybe even as adults, right, or teenagers, there was different points in our life where something had happened. Maybe somebody else had caused that pain, or we were in that situation, and that was too much for us, and we denied, but didn't want us to have that feeling or that emotion. It was too painful.
Yeah.
It was unbearable, and so we said to ourselves, this is too much. We maybe didn't even say that to ourselves. We just kind of said, okay, I'm never going to feel sadness or feel anger
Yeah.
again, because it hurts and it's painful, and so we block that off, right? And when we do that, that's where the when the trauma becomes a trauma. And so what you're talking about
Yeah.
now, this willingness or exposure to go into that through talking to a friend or through talking to a therapist, or even just doing it yourself, is the willingness to go into that feeling, which is the opposite to how the trauma was, you know, made a trauma, right? And so what is left after that process of letting go, of releasing, of forgiveness, is a feeling or emotion, and the trauma is not there anymore if you're able to work through that completely. And so, right
Yeah.
now with you and um, like what you're going through right now, on the other side of that, when you work through this, at some point, what will be left is a feeling, and this trauma, this weight, this burden in your life, this kind of reactiveness will hopefully be less and less, or maybe not even there anymore.
Mm.
And so, for a lot of us, I mean, how amazing would that be to be able to let go from that perspective, to surrender, to stop holding on to these things that literally weigh us down, that cause so much pain and so much grief in our life, to be able to give space for that, to work through these things and to release this. I mean, I couldn't think of anything more like freeing, right?
Yeah. The thing is that so many people are unhappy these days, and no one really understands why.
Mm.
And there's the diagnoses are going up with ADHD, and um, there's so much mental um, unhealthiness, and people are like, oh well, people are starting to see it as normal. But the thing is, life is actually good. The natural state of life is that it's good. So why doesn't it feel good? Well, it feels it. That's because of trauma. That's because you have all these old emotions in you that become stronger with each generation, gathering like a snowball. And then you were the one that woke up. So congratulations, you get to deal with it all, because everyone else in the line, they could only pass it on. They didn't have the strength to deal with it. So you have a very it's a very great task that you've been given, but you can take that pain out of history forever, and that's a great a great opportunity as well. And there's great pride and fulfillment in that task, because you're directly removing pain from the world, and that's pain that you would have passed on whether you wanted to or not.
Breaking the cycle.
Yeah.
What's coming up in you, Thorbjørn, right now? Something
I'm still I'm still releasing the emotion from yesterday. I'm still just kind of in layers. I'm just releasing more of what I experienced yesterday, and just kind of enjoying how much air and freedom there is in that. Because it takes so much of our consciousness and attention and awareness when we have stuff like this growing in our body, in our subconscious. We have all this emotion. It takes so much away from us, so much life energy. And we just have to we have to understand on some level that there are no perpetrators in all this. There are only victims. And it's okay to blame someone, because that's part of the process. That's something you have to allow yourself to do. But at some point with most things, you'll come to a realization that they didn't understand what they were doing. Because the thing is, when someone does something negative to you, they're also hurting themselves. Because if someone gets angry at you, that might be unpleasant for you, but that person is full of anger. They can only get angry at you if they're full of anger, right? And it's actually worse to be full of anger than it is for someone to be angry at you. Because if someone is angry at you, at the very least, you can go away from them, or you can learn to deal with the fact that someone has strong emotions, or you can do a lot of the stuff. But as the person who's angry, you're full of anger. And afterwards, you're full of the knowledge that you did this. And even if you're a person who doesn't take responsibility and who blames other people, and the kind of person that a lot of people with trauma will have experienced, well, that person still has to constantly hide from themselves the fact that they are the ones that did this, that they are the cause of the anger. They have to blame other people. It's constant work to be a bad person and to not confront that, because you constantly have to tell yourself that it's not your fault, even when it is. So what I'm saying is that if someone treats you badly, they can only do that if they're treating themselves badly at the same time. So that means that they haven't gained anything from what they've done. They've hurt you and they've hurt themselves. And if they had understood what they were doing to you, and if they had understood that they could have lived a good life and a good, upstanding, moral life, where they could be happy and proud of themselves and they could be a good influence on the world, then they would have done that. They would absolutely have done that, because that would have made them happier, and it would have made you happier, and everything would have been better. So while it's totally okay and healthy and a step in the process to put blame, if you go through the process, then we more and more come to realize that there aren't really any perpetrators. There are only victims, because we don't understand what we're doing. Usually our trauma comes from our parents. And then when you look at their parents, you find out where that came from. And so you just keep tracing it back, and no one knows where it started, where it ends. And then you have these wars that people were in, where everyone was terribly traumatized, and they didn't happen more than 60 years ago. Before that, it didn't happen more than 40 years before that. And so there were these great wars that just absolutely traumatized people to shit, like so deeply. So some of these people that we call our perpetrators, they come out of the emotions that happened because of the war, or because of their parents' emotions in the war, where they felt fear and anger as you do in war, and all the other emotions. So it's just one line. It's one long line of victims, just creating new victims. But there is a perspective here, and I don't think it's an intellectual one. I think it should come out of wisdom, and that means as you deal with your trauma, the understanding comes. You shouldn't try to adopt this necessarily. You have to feel it on an emotional level. But there is definitely an understanding that there are really no perpetrators. There is only victims, because who would ever choose the bad option if they had a good and a bad one? Who would ever get out of bed and decide to be an idiot and to treat themselves and other people badly? Who would choose to set themselves on fire just to burn other people? Would anyone, can we say that someone is in a sound and clear state of mind if they make that choice? Can we say that they were totally there?
Most likely not. Most likely they were not conscious of their actions or coming from a reactive place. Can I just
And that's the thing.
add, like, you said there's no perpetrators, only victims. What about taking responsibility? Where does that come into that? The perpetrator or the victim, both taking responsibility for what has happened.
Well, I think I think it is ironically important to take responsibility both as a perpetrator and as a victim. To say that as a perpetrator, you have to say, well, what I did was wrong. I didn't know better at the time. Or perhaps I knew better, but I didn't know better than to know better. Because it's very strange. Because you can know what you're doing is wrong, but then still not be able to do it. Or it is a very strange thing. But I think it is important to say that as a perpetrator, you have to say, well, that's what I did at the time. It's not what I would have done today. And to apologize to the person and to say that, if there's anything I can do to make it better, then tell me. And if I find it reasonable, then I will try to atone for it. Because even though I didn't really know what I was doing, there's still a part of me that knew. And for that part, I apologize. And for what happened, I apologize. I think that's because great pain was put onto me as a child. And so unfortunately, I put great pain onto other people. And I have, for the most part, I have tried to own up to that and atone for it and apologize. And that was also part of my healing journey, because I didn't want to be that person. And taking responsibility empowered me to understand that I wanted to be a good person. And it also helped me to see that some of these people they felt better because of it. And some of them didn't even care at the time. It was a bigger deal for me than it was for them. But still, I did the right thing, and that was important for me.
And you showed compassion towards them, because when you come from that place of looking at it from that perspective of that they weren't aware of what they were doing, then you are coming from a place of forgiveness and compassion for that person.
And I think that's what you just said. I think that's a very key thing, is that what an unconscious person does not understand is that the other person is like them. The unconscious person doesn't understand that they are hurting someone who is just like them on the inside. And when you gain that understanding, then you can't really hurt other people anymore, because you realize you're hurting someone just like you. You're making someone suffer just like you suffered, because there's a person just like you on the inside of that other person. And that's part of the understanding of perpetrators and victims, is that no perpetrator really understands that they're doing it to you in the way that you are a person like them. Because if they truly did, they couldn't do it. Because they would be stopped by some higher intelligence that told them, wait, you are now doing something to someone else that you wouldn't want done to you. And this action is illogical. Because if someone did this to you, you would feel bad. So there's a missing, and you said it well, you said they're unconscious, because there's a missing consciousness of understanding that other people are just me in another form. And once you have that understanding, things just change. And before you have that understanding, things are just... It's much easier to hurt other people if you think there's some different creature than you. And sometimes you may not even think that they have emotions, because you've created an idea in your head and you've reduced them to this thing. Or they're just an idiot or whatever. Well, an idiot doesn't have emotions like you do. But another person who's going through it just like you in this moment, they have emotions just like you.
They feel pain.
And maybe you don't want to hurt them.
They feel...
Because you don't want to get hurt.
Yeah. And say if you did come to this place of forgiveness, Thorbjørn, this kind of final stage in the process of trauma release or letting go, what can you do to forgive somebody for their actions or for their unconscious behaviors or their reactions to you, or the pain that they've caused in your life?
Well, what do you think about that? What's your take on it?
I think that forgiveness is the final stage of this trauma release and letting go. And there's different ways of going about this. I mean, one way is by writing a letter, like we talked about earlier, where maybe you're writing it to the person themselves, and you're writing about all the things that has happened, the trauma that you've experienced and the pain that you've felt, and also the forgiveness that you have towards that person. And that might not be easy, right? Definitely not. And this letter doesn't need to be sent to them. You can just write it, and you never have to send it at all. But simply writing the letter can be part of the forgiveness. And this forgiveness is, like, you might think it's an intellectual one if you're writing it down, right? But it's as much as when you write something or when you talk about something or when you bring it up, as human beings, we're able to access that part, that history that we've had. And so therefore the emotion or the thoughts come up as well. And that's where the release is, right? The release is in that all the feeling and everything comes up when we do write this pain down or this forgiveness down. And there's something else that I also do with people who come and see me when we do trauma work together. And that's where we kind of get a chair and we place it out in front of us in the room. And we bring to, like, in a guided way, like, imagine that the person that you're forgiving is there sitting in front of you. So you don't need to actually the person to be there in real life, but you can imagine that they're there. And then there's a dialogue that happens between you and that person that you're going to forgive, and what you want to say to them and what you want them to say to you. For example, you said earlier, like, about responsibility and them saying sorry for what they've done. It could be something like that, for example. But in any way that makes sense to you, to imagine that dialogue happening and then giving the space for you to forgive that person or to say sorry or to say what you want to hear from them or vice versa. And that is an extremely powerful way of, like, a forgiveness thing that you can do. But whatever works for you, writing a letter, doing this, sitting with the emotion, like, ultimately comes down to this final stage, from my perspective at least, of forgiveness, of compassion for the other person and for their unconscious behaviors or their inability to know what they were doing at that time.
Yeah.
How do you see that, Thorbjørn? What's your take?
Yeah, I think that's very true, and it strikes me that it's all ways of acknowledging how you feel, right?
100%.
Talking about it, writing it down, feeling it. It's all ways of acknowledging that this is how I feel.
Willing to have that feeling, right? Acknowledging that it's there. I'm with that. I'm going to sit with that.
Yeah. Because I think what we have to remember is that, of course, if you can pacify the kingdom, if you can make peace with people, make peace in your family, if you can do all that, that's great if you get that opportunity. But I also think from a higher perspective, what we're really talking about is your peace of mind. It's your immortal soul here. You need this peace. You need to release this trauma, because life isn't really about what happened to you. It can become about that, and it does become about that in large terms for a lot of people. for a lot of their life. But that's not really what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to be able to be free in yourself and to enjoy life and to enjoy being conscious and to come to a realization of yourself. And this trauma, it gets in the way of that. It
blocks you from that path.
So it does. So if we can try to understand that this is much greater than victims and perpetrators and sinners and saints and all these roles that we play. This is about our freedom, and we are meant to be free. And so, and I think perhaps that's a big thing also, is that forgiveness is always, or at least for the most part, something we do for ourselves. You don't forgive other people to release them from their crime so they can do it again. Definitely or whatever. Not. We forgive people so that we can become free of what they did. And sometimes we forgive people.
That's when I say this forgiveness also is not saying that what they did is okay. This forgiveness is acknowledging what they've done and forgiving them for that action, right? It's definitely not saying like you can keep doing what you're doing and that's fine.
Right.
It's saying like, I forgive you, especially the person you were when you did this.
Yeah. And it's probably important to say that forgiveness doesn't mean that they have access either. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you allow that person into your life again. There are people who definitely have to make sure that person never gets into their life again.
But it's setting you free. Like this forgiveness is a lot about you as a person, and setting your soul free, or yourself, so that you're able to let go of what's happened to you in the past and live your life fully right now, and feel and experience joy and experience or express yourself fully, and be free to live like who you are and who you're meant to be in this life. And this trauma is like you said earlier, is holding you back. It's a blockage towards that, towards your path and yourself. And you deserve the freedom as a human being in this world. You deserve to be free, to be able to be to live, to kind of to glow and to light up and give that to others as well. You deserve everything. And so this work in releasing the trauma can give you more of that, more of living your fullest self or potential in this life.
Yeah, and it's just so important to become free of what happened to us. That's not who we are.
That's not who we have to identify with. I'm really happy that we talked about this today, Thorbjørn. I know it's been a heavy subject, but this is also a powerful one for a lot of people, right? And
we are the conscious path. It is to set all beings free. That is where we're going, and to set ourselves free, but also to set our perpetrators free, because a lot of them will not be able to forgive themselves either unless we forgive them. Because while we were the victims and there is great pity for us, they were the perpetrators. And how do you live with that? It's one thing to have something done to you. You can learn to let go of that. But how do you live with the fact that you did something to other people? In a way, they are the real victims of unconscious behavior and a responsibility that is now very difficult to live with, because they hurt other people. Then how do you deal with that? But it's the same process, right?
It's the same process, but perhaps even more challenging to forgive self than to give others. And that is also something that we can do.
But again, it's okay to forgive yourself for what you did, as long as you can say to the person, well, I take responsibility for what I did. I'm sorry for what I did. And if there's anything I can do to atone for it within reason. Of course, it shouldn't be unreasonable. It shouldn't be a destructive thing. It shouldn't be like revenge. But if there's anything you can do within reason to atone, then do it. If you've done those things, if you've found wisdom and you've taken responsibility and you've asked for forgiveness and you've offered atonement, then there is no more reason for you to hold on either, because you're not helping the world by staying in a state of mind that is painful. You're not helping the victim either. The world is only becoming worse through your pain. So
you have it.
And that's the other side, because we all have been perpetrators as well. That's unavoidable, right?
So we all have a choice right now, right? A choice to take full responsibility, or as much as we can, for what we have done to others and what others have done to ourselves. And we have a choice to work with that, to acknowledge it, and to allow ourselves to be willing to be in that, to let go and to forgive, to learn from these things and set ourselves free and others.
And that's the work, and that's what we're here to do.
And we are doing, both of us as well, in our own life.
And we're doing it. All right. Well, finally we got that episode done. It's an important episode.
Yeah, heavy one.
Very heavy.
If you made it to the end, we're very happy that you listened in, and we hope that you're able to realize, to be aware, become more aware of some of these things, and perhaps even know what you can do now with it as well. And if you're brave enough to go into it yourself, then we would love for you to do that. And if you're not, then there's always help available, or there's always somebody that you can lean on and go to that person. So
always reach out when you can.
Yeah.
That's terrible. Many people have died, committed suicide, been lost to substance abuse because they didn't want to ask for help. So just ask for help. Just go over that threshold. It's so important.
And it's very okay.
All right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that's it for today.
That's definitely it from us today, Thorbjørn.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being you in this today, Thorbjørn, and just
that's all I know how to do.
Amazing. Looking forward to the next episode, and have a good day. Enjoy being. That's it.
Yeah. We'll see you on the trail.